thank you for that, and thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Like JR mentioned, the title of this talk is the soft side of cyber. And so basically what we're going to be focusing on is there's a lot of emphasis placed, and I'll get into some details in just a little bit and expanding on that thought. There's a lot of emphasis placed on technical skills in our industry. So security engineering, hardening systems, secure configurations, secure software development, crafting phishing emails, penetration testing, like secure code review, threat modeling, all of this stuff. And all of that is very, very important for being successful in any particular role that you're in, or any of it's necessary for, or all of it is necessary for building a successful security program. But very little emphasis is placed on everything beyond the technical side of the industry. And I believe that that is just as, if not more important than the technical aspects of our field. And so, here is some of my contact information. If ever you guys want to hit me up after this and chat, this is basically where you can find me just about anywhere on the internet, and that is my email address. But I'm going to start off playing a little clip. And this was, believe it or not, I hope that the audio comes through clearly, but believe it or not, this is from a keynote address at a fairly sizable conference. And I'll expand on why I think this is a huge issue in just one moment after the clip is wrapped up. So
many organizations we walk into to do assessments and consultative engagements with, let alone breaking into the buggers. We ask you, hi, so what policies do you have for acceptable use policy for little Johnny over there using his home computer on your corporate network? Well, we're a trusted environment. Great, I'm going to taser Johnny until you put an acceptable use policy in place. I just walked into one.
Okay, so I hope that audio came through clearly. JR, if you could give me a thumbs up if you were able to hear it. Fantastic. So it's stuff like that, and I'm not going to out the individual or the conference that where that came from, but it's stuff like that, and then you mix it with headlines like this, and these are just a very, very small snippet of the kind of headlines that you'll see on the internet, and it's basically it's a very adversarial stance from our industry outwards to the rest of the individuals that we are supposed to be helping, supposed to be enabling. You hear a lot of talk on, security podcasts and stuff, about empowering business, partner with the organization, do all of this, do all of that. But at the same time, our industry is just rampantly putting stuff like this out, calling people stupid for basically using email when how do businesses communicate with one another, if not through via email or phone or social media, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that in a lot of ways, this is a failing of our industry to make things easy and straightforward and make security the default or the best option from a behavioral psychology or behavioral economics standpoint. And so fundamentally, I believe that cybersecurity is a team sport. So what I mean by that is we cannot be successful in our role without the active participation of other departments, other people, vendors that we're working with, et cetera, et cetera. Security is not like, and I guess, you could say this about any particular department or role in an organization. Take a product engineering team at a SaaS company, for example. The engineering team could build the best product in the world, and if it's not marketed properly, if it doesn't have a good sales funnel, if operations doesn't support it, et cetera, then it's unlikely to thrive. But one of the big things about security is we cannot succeed if we do our thing, and we have individuals either actively undermining the process or policy that we're trying to put in place, or hang on, I see some stuff happening on chat, but the mouse is not showing up for me. So I'm sorry if people are chatting and I'm not seeing those. I just see the little number ticking up. But anyway, you know, fundamentally, I believe that cybersecurity is a team sport, and if we want to change and move in a more positive trend that is not riddled with breaches, riddled with data loss, riddled with abuse, riddled with fraud, et cetera, then I think we need to clean up our house. And what I mean by that, our house is our industry, ourselves first. And I believe that that starts with each of us taking accountability over the fact that as a security practitioner working within arguably, I think, a position of authority inside of organizations, we need to understand the fact that our words, our behavior, and our work has a certain perception to it. And we need to be connecting and actually like partnering with other individuals. And sometimes that means not having this picture perfect in a lab, in a vacuum security solution rolled out, but rather focusing more on risk, like effective risk management that also helps an organization accomplish whatever it is attempting to accomplish more efficiently and effectively at scale. And so with that out of the way, here's some of the things that I plan on covering today. So we just talked about why in the world that this matters, at least in my opinion and experience. And for the rest of the time that we have together today, we'll be talking about some aspects of security education, reinforcing what I mentioned earlier about where people are learning security skills and what they're learning about when they're at those places or consuming those pieces of content. We'll talk about diversity. It's a big topic in the security field today. And then we'll talk about some essential soft skills, and then we'll drill a little bit deeper into some of those. I mean, there's infinite material on soft skills in general, but really what I want to try to do through this talk is drive home the point that as a security professional in any role, whether it's you're an entry-level SOC analyst or a chief security officer, that you need to be embracing both the technical hard skills, quote unquote hard skills, as well as the interpersonal soft skills that go into a particular job if you really want to make an impact and be successful. So getting right into it, security education. So there's a number of different places where people are learning about security and what they learn about where they go to those various places. So you see everything from like PhDs and masters and bachelors in information security, cybersecurity, information assurance, all of that, to trade schools, to conferences, et cetera. And so I'm just going to break down a number of different sources as I've seen them. You know, I've had exposure to some, I think just about all of these in some capacity. I went to Syracuse University as an example, and minored in information security. And I don't think I apply anything that I learned in my university background in my professional day-to-day, ironically. And that's just because my job focus has shifted so majorly. But university degrees, very, very technical. Most often, there's a lot of security theory work, like intro to cryptography and network security and how packets work and packet analysis and maybe exploitation, et cetera, et cetera. All of that stuff is a good groundwork for breaking into entry-level roles, of course. There's certification programs to help you basically prep and or take and achieve certain certifications. Those certifications vary in terms of effectiveness or technicality or intended purpose, such as the consuming audience. So, you know, larger organizations that just want to see security certification may orient towards the CISSP. More technical, exploitation-oriented organizations may orient towards the OSCP. Trade schools are popping up. I've only talked to people who have either been going through or running some of these, but those are oftentimes very technically oriented, almost like a software boot camp. There's a lot of those as well, and it's very geared towards achieving a very specific kind of job outcome on the tail end of that, or when you graduate out of that trade school. There's online courses in the hundreds, if not thousands at this point, also very technically oriented. A covering everything from penetration testing to AWS security to incident response to packet analysis. Basically, any specific technical problem or challenge or hurdle that one may encounter on the job in some sort of security capacity. There's tons of books, tons of blogs, stuff like that. Go just search online for cybersecurity. Some of the most popular ones are like the red team and blue team field manuals, offensive security, or offensive Python or Black Hat Python. Those sort of books where you're basically, writing exploit tools or writing blue team tools and things like that. Again, very technical in nature. There's conference talks. So as an example, I plucked AppSec California out of a hat. It's one of my favorite conferences, most notably because of the proximity to the beach and when it takes place. It's amazing. After Corona, everyone should attempt to check it out at some point. But in 2018, when they ran the conference, there were 44 technical talks and then 4 very and I categorize these very generously, loosely related people talks. And so for something that I feel is 50-50, this is I do not feel that this is at all proportional in terms of the education that we're trying to provide to our industry. And then there's in-person or on-the-job training, where you bring in some kind of professional trainer, they talk about a thing. And this is one of those things where they, again, are trying to solve a very specific technical problem. You bring in somebody, they teach you how to secure your code against the OWASP top 10 to, write more secure code, take advantage of security mechanisms in a programming framework or in a language framework, something like that. Again, very technically oriented. So, yeah, sorry, damn it.
Hey, Robert, staying on the topic of students, we had a question prior to the session starting.
Great.
They were asking, how do you build interest in the soft side if students only want to hack? And that kind of generalization of only hacking is in cybersecurity.
Yeah, well, so to give you context, I started my career off in a penetration testing and red teaming role, and I eventually moved my way up into leading the red team assessment services at Cigital before they were purchased. And one thing I would say about that is I do not believe you can be an effective pen tester or quote unquote hacker if you do not have effective communication skills. And that boils down to presentation skills, to writing skills, to negotiation in some cases where you're working through the scope of a particular project and being diligent with status updates, things like that. Because one of the things that is inevitable in pen testing is the tail end of any assessment is you are writing some kind of report or some kind of assessment breakdown or write-up. And in that case, you are trying to convey the risks or weaknesses in a particular system or environment, things like that. And if you can't do that effectively, then you're not changing anything. And if you're not changing anything, then you're just doing it for fun. And that's, you're really just having fun and getting paid for it, which, I like some people that is totally fine. And that's just kind of like why people might get into the field. I fundamentally don't believe that. I know that is the case for some people. They just want to, have fun and hack stuff. But I don't think that that's the case for a lot of folks. I think you get into a career because you're passionate about it, because you want to make a difference in something. And so, you can't be effective in those kind of roles if you are not, if you're not a good communicator. And specifically from pen testing, those I think are the most important soft skills, or those are the ones that jump out to me.
Thank you. That was a great example.
Yeah.
Mr. Barber also had a question. It was basically a statistic. Is it true that 80% of hackers' job is data gathering, analysis, and reporting?
I don't know about 80%. It depends on any particular process that you're following. I mean, reporting is a big part of it. I would argue the most important part of it, because, you know, again, if you like, you could get the best assessment in the world. Like, I've worked with some extremely skilled um, exploitation engineers, and, you know, and then watch them just flounder about trying to report things to management teams and operations teams, and those people will just laugh that individual off, even though, like, there's some really severe critical stuff happening. um, so, you know, I guess I would say it's, you know, if you were to break an assessment down into initial like scoping, data gathering, you know, some scanning and stuff like that, to like figure out, like, just buckshot spray, figure out where potential weaknesses are, targeted exploitation, and then wrap up reporting and communication. You know, it's probably roughly divided like 20, like 20% across the board for each of those phases. You know, and of course, like, you might spend a little bit more time here and there. Like, if you know, start pulling on a thread and it, you know, you're finding some really interesting things, like, you might spend a little more time testing. But I don't know if it's as high as 80%. That seems high to me.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's all the questions so far.
Great. Thank you for chiming in with those. So yeah, so some of the typical reasons that I've heard people getting into security, you know, tech jobs are growing. You know, you see the job reports coming out of the census and the jobs bureau and stuff like that. There's high salaries. You know, you can make six figures. You can, you know, change your life, blah blah blah. And you can, you know, there's growth potential. You can start off at a certain rung, and then you can end up way up here if you know, climb the ladder, get a more senior position, et cetera, et cetera. You know, you hear stories about like Netflix engineers making $300,000 a year, and like, ooh, I want to make $300,000 a year. So, you know, I think it's important for anyone getting into the industry to figure out, you know, all those things are great. Money's great, influence is great, having a good job is great, having job security is great. All, you know, all of that stuff is helpful. You know, but you're ultimately going to end up like chasing the wrong kinds of opportunities and I think you will end up acting in stressful situations in a more negative light if you don't start with and figure out like why you want to get into the industry. And so, you know, whether it's, you know, being in a protector defender role, whether you want to work with a supportive team and like really help an organization go farther, faster, higher, or you just want to help other people, like figure out what that thing is that's really driving you to get into security, or you just love solving complex problems, you know, things like that. Like, that's going to guide the kinds of roles and the kinds of organizations that you inevitably work for, whether you go work, you know, with a nonprofit or the government or a tech company, big tech company versus startup, et cetera. You know, I've worked with large companies, I've worked with small companies. I'm at a quasi startup right now. And that's very, very different than a large company and or a consultancy that I was at the earlier stage of my career. So, you know, figure out why you want to do what you want to do. And, you know, I believe that this stuff will follow when you are really following this. So shifting gears, I want to pivot into diversity, and, you know, this is going to sound and look funny, you know, white dude talking about diversity, but you know, one thing that I want to drive home is that, at least what I've heard most people talk about, and I think this is like the upside of opportunity in this space, is what I've heard most people talk about when they refer to diversity in our field is they want to see more women working in cybersecurity roles at varying levels and across industries, which is awesome. One thing that I think we also need to be cognizant of and focused on is and this is by no means an exhaustive list. You know, I think there's the last like diversity sort of training I went through, you know, cited like 17 or 20 different dimensions of diversity that are oftentimes considered by professionals who do this stuff for a living, like HR professionals and stuff. But you know, there's a lot of different dimensions of diversity that influence the way someone thinks, the way they solve problems, the way they communicate, the way they you know, conduct themselves in an organization. And so I think we could stand to really focus on expanding our notion of what it means to be a supporter of diversity. And some of the reasons that I've seen this, like in teams that I've built at startups, that I've seen this really pan out is I think it really helps prevent groupthink, where you get a bunch of people in a room who all think the exact same way, and it doesn't matter if you have 1 or 10 of them in the room, they're going to solve a problem almost the exact same way. I also think diversity can really help incite creativity. When you get in and do a brainstorming session, somebody who comes from the defense industry versus somebody who's coming from IT versus somebody who's coming from an incident response role, they're all going to tackle problems very, very differently. Or somebody who comes from a data privacy sort of role, they're all going to have very different perspectives on what it means to solve a problem, or what a problem even is in the first place. And I believe it also, this also starts at the top, but it's, top down, bottom up. But I also think it does a lot to encourage respect within and across teams, which is, enormously useful for, creating a positive work environment and such. And so some things that everyone can do to support diversity across any dimension, gender, race, background, educational background, age, whatever, is at least, again, this is in my experience, is stop doing so much talking and do a little bit more listening. You've probably all heard the mantra, you have 2 ears, 1 mouth. So try to do twice as much listening as you do talking. I think that's a good rule to live by. Don't stand for any kind of bullying or dismissiveness in your teams. So, I've personally witnessed a lot of this when you have somebody senior, or just they're in meetings, like looking up and looking down at their phone, like not listening to anybody, and then somebody voices an opinion, and then they're like, yeah, we can't do that, that's a dumb idea, like let's do something else, and then they go back to what they're doing. Like if you see that kind of stuff, like call it out, don't stand for it, don't allow it. Do what you can to not allow that, because it will corrode the trust within a team very, very quickly. And then some things that you can do. So I found it very helpful to prompt others for ideas, in brainstorming sessions, like, let everyone talk once before anyone talks twice, that kind of thing. Put your pride down, help others, and properly attribute ideas. So that way, if somebody has a really great idea that might be a underrepresented dimension on a team, make sure that they get the credit where credit's due. And these are really simple, silly things, but they can be very, very powerful when you are taken into and you're operating in a very stressful context that is cybersecurity at times. Any questions before I jump into this last section?
Looks like there's none, but a bunch of comments about a good point about reporting, how you're doing your example about pen testing and able to create that bridge between the communication gap and stuff like that.
Yeah, cool. I'm very happy to provide some more sort of pen testing, specific examples, depending on like what people are interested in after we get through this little bit, for what it's worth. Okay, so at least in my experience, this has been some of the most important soft skills that I think anyone in the field should be really working on propping up. So creativity, it's figuring out unique ways to solve problems, and not just using what you pulled down on the internet. Adapting your plans to suit the needs of others. Being able to lead wherever you are in an organization. Lead by example, just influence others, etc. Determination. So what I mean by that is, things will be hard in any sort of role, even if you're pen testing. Like, there's going to be a lot of things that you're going to have crappy days, you're going to have hard days, and you're going to need to like suck it up and get through those days. You're going to have days that you don't want to do a thing, but you gotta push through it. Problem solving. There's a lot of problems everywhere. The laundry list is quite long for many security teams, and figuring out creative ways to solve those problems is clutch. Again, listening, making sure that you are not simply there to push your opinion on others. And listening is one of the skills I'm going to dig into a little bit more a little later. presentation and communication kind of go hand in hand in many cases. Being a team player, again, this is not a solo sport. It's a team sport. Even if you're operating on a big team, like everyone needs to do their part, and then everyone in an organization needs to do their part. So you have to be able to work with others. Negotiation. So again, there's some security teams that are still out there that have this dogmatic, we're just going to push out the policy and say this is what you need to do approach. That never works. You may see a slight blip of adherence in terms of how things are, or adherence to the policy, and then people will eventually actively either forget about it or find ways around it and just do their job anyways. So you have to be able to find ways to meet in the middle. Mentorship ties back into diversity. You want to be able to prop up and help others, so that way we have more good people working in and across this field. Our need for the need for skilled people is greater every single day. And then adversarial thinking, which is being able to basically think through the lens of somebody who wants to see bad things happen. So I'll dig in a little bit deeper into each of the, or into a couple of these, just as an example, not all of them. So communication, in my opinion, this is all about getting your point across, as well as hearing where somebody else is coming from. So one thing that I think a lot of people fail to recognize when they are thinking about communication is, they may focus on their public speaking skills or writing emails, et cetera, or how they conduct themselves in a meeting. But it's whenever you're communicating with somebody, whether it's on some kind of chat or a phone call, conference call, in-person meeting, video conference, writing emails, et cetera, like all of those things constitute communication, and you need to be able to effectively get your point across in any of those forums and all of those forums if you're participating in all of them. I think it's worthwhile, and it will benefit you immensely over the course of your career, is to continually try to find where you are weak in any form of communication, and try to make plans to shore that up, whether it's getting somebody to help coach you through these things, just practice, reading books about it, any number of things. Adapting. So I've mentioned this a couple of times, how things are not this picture perfect lab environment where you come out with your security policy and you say, here's how I want things to work. It never ever goes that way. And I will say this, I know it's the second bullet, I probably should have made it the first, but security is not the most important thing for any organization on the face of the earth. It's not. Nobody who says that, anyone who says that is lying to you. Security can be very important to an organization, but organizations are not in the business of securing what it is they're doing. They're trying to do something else, and in support of that thing, they're applying information security to protect it. Whether it's a nonprofit who is trying to make donations to developing countries to build up their economies, whether it's the NSA doing counterintelligence and stuff across, doing counterintelligence and signals intelligence overseas, whether it's a SaaS company who happens to be even building a security product. Security is not the most important thing. So, we have to remember that, and we have to make sure that if we're working in one of those security supporting roles, whether on a team or in a consulting capacity, that you take that into consideration, that you need to be crafting your work and your message to support the thing that they're actually trying to do. If you take one thing away from this talk, I hope that is the thing. Negotiation. So again, they're trying to go in a certain direction. Security is oftentimes trying to slow things down to think through risk and control risk, et cetera. You need to find ways to meet in the middle with the various stakeholders that you're going to be working with. Risk in another way of thinking about it is opportunity. So taking on more risk has potential huge upside, but it can obviously also be potentially dangerous. So, you have to work with people to figure out ways to do things safely. Again, listening, so clutch. There's a lot of complaints if you're working in security at an organization, large or small, that you may hear about. Antivirus causing things to just completely, lock up laptops. CASB tools are notorious for blocking, breaking things on laptops, like developer workflows and stuff. Vendor procurement is notorious for just grinding things to a halt. Listen to the struggles that people have and actually like finding opportunities to actively seek them out so that you can take them back and find ways to address them. Another huge way to win a lot of brownie points if you want to career ladder climb. It's a great way to do it. And that adversarial thinking. So again, this is approaching problems and situations from a contrarian or adversarial perspective. There's a bunch of great books on red teaming from Bryce Hoffman and Micah Zenko that I would recommend starting with. Thinking about like the theory of red teaming, which is really like the at the core of all this. But some general questions that you can ask yourself before you dig into those texts. Things like, how will this go wrong? How could it go wrong? Who would want it to go wrong? How would they benefit if it went wrong? And continuously going through those kind of exercises and even brainstorming, with others on a particular problem, I think is a great starting place. You'll get a lot of interesting ideas. And so in the interest of time, I'm going to start shifting to the wrap up. I'm sorry, I started moving a little quicker there. I wanted to leave any time for questions and comments. But some things that I recommend to placing on your to-do list as far as career development. So, and soft skills specifically. So, I mean, you can learn all the technical skills you want. I've done in my career in particular, I've done everything from hacking video game consoles like the Wii U to physically breaking into banks and figuring out ways to transfer money around, to building security programs that have assisted like big federal projects moving into ATOs, to helping SaaS companies build security programs and achieve certain compliance initiatives, to web app pen testing. Like I've done a lot of different stuff in my career, so technical skills are constantly changing. This is the stuff that will ground you and help you actually grow. Things to do is name where you're weak and own it. It's okay to be weak in a certain area and make plans to improve it. Figure out why your role exists, whatever that role happens to be, and whether or not you're aligned. And if you're not aligned, figure out how to get there. That goes back to the security is not the most important thing to any organization. I also strongly recommend reading and studying outside of our field. So there's a lot of great work that organizational psychologists do. If you want something simple and easy to consume, there's a podcast called Work Life by Adam Grant. It's amazing. You'll get a lot of great ideas that might help you think about some of the things you might go through in a more creative way. And find ways to, quote unquote, work across the aisle with other teams that historically may have seemed at odds with security, whether that's engineering teams, IT, legal, privacy, customer service, sales, etc. In my current role, I work with every other department in our company, and as does my team. And like right now, we're going through the process of doing business risk assessments, which is the process of looking at various processes they have and how we can find ways to manage risk and implement controls throughout those processes. So like building, like selling to new customers or renewing customers, things like that. And some of the feedback that I've gotten, like just being there as a sounding board to help them think through some of their problems has been enormously helpful. And it gives them extra voice if they want to try to find ways to funnel more budget into their particular problems. And then, set development goals, because like you don't grow without goals. You don't grow in the comfort zone, to use an old cliche. So things not to do. So do not hoard projects and just hoard work and be a solo player. That will work for you for the short term. It will not work for you for the long term. You will A, potentially burn yourself out, B, not deliver on, quality that you could have. And, and leadership notices these kind of things. You look selfish, you look like you're a solo player, and you don't want to pigeonhole yourself. Don't try to promote security as the most important thing. Again, it is not the most important thing. Recognizing that and like truly embracing that is your first step to a more enlightened career in the field. Don't shy away from hard feedback discussions. So, you're going to get feedback from any number of places in your career. It's important not to back down from those things and, really embrace like hearing where you may need to shore things up. And I'll just jump out down the end because I don't want to just read these things off for you guys, but don't be afraid to ask for help or say, I don't know. This is one of those things like, again, circling back to my own career, there's been a lot of situations where I did not know how to do something or where I was going to start. And until, I would like, for example, the Nintendo video game hacking stuff. I had never done things like that before. I voiced that I had never done things like that before. There was some overlap with experience I did have. So I got connected with some experts, learned as much as I could, as quickly as I could, got pointed in the right direction and sort of figured it out on the fly. But if I had gone into that pounding my chest, thinking that, telling everyone that I knew exactly what I was doing, then I probably would have fallen flat on my face. Earlier, or like very early in the process, or at least like sort of, I might have been able to like play it off like everything was going super well until I had to deliver the final report. So anyways, we've reached the end of my slide content here.